Here. My name is Phil. I'm a network architect lead at Eon Digital Technology for WAN, LAN and Wi-Fi. Eon Digital Technology is essentially the IT arm of Eon. We have one customer, and that is Eon Group. 3 years ago, Eon started down the path of SD-WAN. Why we did so, who we chose as a vendor to work with, and what our new modern flexible WAN looks like, I'll share with you over the next 20 minutes. But first, who or what is Eon? Eon is a large energy solutions provider in Europe, headquartered in Germany. We're into everything energy related, grid transport, gas storage, energy trading, retail, car charging, vehicle charging at the home and the garage, and so on. We are focused on energy innovation and sustainability, and we're using smart tech and renewables to become more energy efficient, not only for ourselves, for our customers as well. We use innovation like drones now to inspect power lines. We have an energy research centre that we're quite proud of. And we've used a hydrogen fuel cell to power a 400-room hotel in Frankfurt. We have around 40,000 locations in Europe. These include storage, maintenance, grid transport, that sort of thing. And we connect the corporate WAN to around 1,300 locations in Europe. It is these 1,300 locations that I work with. There's a lot of innovation in the energy market. This not only keeps us competitive, but assists us with energy targets like reduced carbon footprint and better sustainability and the like. But innovation also prepares us for the next few years of change. It helps us with real-world business problems such as stability, resiliency. And 3 years ago, there was a perception that Eon's applications could be performing better over the network. So we undertook a serious review of our network, and we found a lot of things that needed to be fixed. But one of the things we found, and this is obviously a common theme with most organizations, is that most of our data or most of our applications is pulled from the internet or the cloud. So we have our physical data centers, our leased Eon data centers, but these data centers are becoming empty because our data has been migrated to the cloud. So Eon has adopted cloud computing, and we are a cloud-first organization. We've moved to or are moving to decentralized networks. So our data has moved out of the physical leased data centers and into the clouds of Azure and AWS and SAP. Digital transformation or digitization means our applications are innovating faster and are doing so in the cloud, not only for the economic benefits this gives us, but also for the flexibility. And nothing scales as quickly and as deeply as the cloud does. Collaboration with our suppliers, our partners, our internal conversations, that now occurs on the internet. And also the business-to-business, machine communications, that's also occurring in the cloud these days. And increasingly, our customer interaction is increasingly digital as well these days, probably like most of you are already experiencing. So to summarize all of that, our data has moved. Our dynamic interactive applications, they're on the internet now. And we are producing and consuming more and more data every month. So over 80% of our traffic is now trying to find the nearest internet exit point. So the question was, is our current network architecture fit for purpose? So on the screen in front of you now is a familiar picture to many of you who work in the industry. One or more physical data centers connecting via MPLS to one or several sites with one or two central internet breakouts, an Azure Express route or an AWS Direct Connect perhaps. So Eon has sites from Sweden to Italy, from Romania to the UK. For internet and cloud hosted traffic, we suffer from the tyranny of distance and latency to reach those internet breakout points. So this for us was a driver for change. With over 80% of our traffic from 1,300 sites trying to reach these internet exit points, then the internet breakouts in the data centers drive a quicker than usual cycle of investment for upgrades. And this was also a driver for change. Eon is a big Microsoft Teams user, and at every Microsoft Ignite conference, Microsoft say, do not use central internet breakouts. that breaks the anycast model or the distributed transport relays in the cloud. So this for us was another driver for change. So we knew we had to change. We had to have a broader geographical model of reaching the internet and the cloud, and a high performance one. So how do we do that? And this is how we started down SD-WAN. So yes, we can stand up more regional internet breakouts around Europe, but the internet breakout architecture we have is quite infrastructure heavy. So there's quite a lot of network and security appliances in line. So there's a high entry cost. And with the global supply chain problems at the moment, there's also a problem with delay and then high ongoing costs. So we wanted a simpler architecture model down to a single box, if we could, to have internet breakouts and support a decentralized model. This was another driver for change. Other SD-WAN requirements, I mean, they're similar to other organizations, we're all under cost pressure. We look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant. We wanted useful APIs, feature set, support, scalability. So all of these are pretty common to everybody. For us, we also wanted to, provide secure EON WAN access over any internet medium. We wanted to leverage the ability to use whatever internet medium was available. Not all of our offices are in cities with lots of fiber around. So microwave, satellite, 4G, we wanted to be able to leverage that. We wanted to provide the full security stack for EON applications in the cloud. And at EON, we have a lot of projects, going on all the time around Europe. And so we have a lot of external consultants. And these external consultants typically use our guest internet or guest Wi-Fi. So we wanted to provide a full security stack for guest internet at all of these locations. And so we wanted to leverage categories layer 7 filtering to block categories such as gambling, violence, pornography, that sort of thing. And we wanted a vendor that would update all of those categories in the background. So manual URL, adding an internet domain when there's probably hundreds added every week to these categories was not going to work for us. We wanted something automated. Operationally, we wanted to have less use of the CLI for our service provider to not have to jump into CLI for every second thing. We wanted a technology that was reliable, that was resistant to low quality links, that would change in milliseconds to a better quality link if needed. And under the old model, the traditional MPLS WAN, I mean, that's just, this diagram here just shows one WAN, but in reality, we have WANs in Sweden, a WAN in Italy, one in Romania, one in Hungary, UK. They're all different MPLS providers. And so even though we get a report every month from a different provider, we really wanted an overlay visibility, wanted to be able to respond to trends as they happen in real time. We wanted to be proactive in there, and we wanted to, as I said, an overlay visibility so we could see traffic across the whole group. So we had a long list of requirements, and these are also drivers for change. So the old model works, but it's no longer optimal for us. So creating the fast lane. We still keep MPLS and we still keep some of the physical data centers, but we move away from MPLS being our only network connectivity and the data center being our only access to the internet. We have a new design, which we call the intelligent network. And the intelligent network meets our objectives of direct cloud and as a service connectivity across a broad front for our user base. It addresses the requirements and drivers for change we knew needed to happen. We deeply leverage distributed Zscaler cloud enforcement nodes. These provide us with edge, zero trust cloud security for our applications and resources in our data centers in the cloud and from home, where, like a lot of you are working from these days. We introduced cloud-managed controllerless Wi-Fi. And in our drive to reduce our infrastructure footprint, controllerless Wi-Fi is also good. We improve our agility, therefore, we can stand up sites faster and therefore higher productivity. There's improved quality of service, there's less complex routing, but a significant part of the intelligent network is SD-WAN and turning the natural advantages of SD-WAN into benefits for EON. Business intent overlays, automation, visibility, flexibility, aggregated bandwidth, and so on. So we had to choose an SD-WAN vendor, and in the end we chose Silver Peak. Excuse me while I organise my notes. To have a complete design, we needed to decide upon an SD-WAN vendor. And when we started, there were over 60 SD-WAN vendors in the market, so we had to narrow it down. So the first thing we did is, like what most organizations do, we look at Gartner and we look at particular quadrants of Gartner and then make a decision what to do from there. But we narrowed it down to 6 SD-WAN vendors, and then we started a paper-based exercise on narrowing that down to 3. And of the 6 vendors, we sent each of them a list of around 30 business and 30 technical requirements and asked them to complete that, whether they could meet each requirement or partially meet or not meet at all. One vendor actually responded with, we're not going to fill that out, we just want to talk to your decision maker. So we were lucky in that we had a management team who had a buy-in. What I mean by that is they were invested in finding a new solution, like us, and they were patient, which was good because it took us 12 months to make a decision, mainly due to external impacts like COVID, and we're in the middle of another energy acquisition. But the vendor selection process was robust. We had a lot of research. We had a lot of conversations with a lot of people, and these included service providers around the world that some of us had contacts with. We talked to other organizations, and these private conversations are really useful because out of the public eye, you learn a lot of information about the SD-WAN technology and whether it is fit for purpose and what works and what didn't. From the paper-based exercise, we narrowed it down to 3 vendors, and we invited each of these 3 vendors to run a proof of concept. And each vendor got 2 sites each and a data center. The value of the proof of concept for Ian, I cannot overstate it. It was so valuable to determine the vendor. And here we've chosen Silver Peak, but when we started the proof of concept, I did not think Silver Peak was a leader. In fact, the leader who I thought was probably going to be the eventual winner was the first one to be dropped from the proof of concept because it could not meet a key requirement. SD-WAN for us, Silver Peak for us, which as you probably know now has been acquired by HP and placed under the Aruba division. Been a stable, very reliable platform, massive feature set. We're only using some of it, but we're very happy with it. We have 3 basic site architectures in Eon. We have our native MPLS, which is still quite a few of them. We have a hybrid model where we combine SD-WAN and MPLS. I understand that SD-WAN will use MPLS as an underlay, just like an internet circuit. And then we have what we call intelligent network only, or SD-WAN only, where we don't use MPLS anymore. This another basic diagram just shows you how our single SD-WAN box, our Silver Peak box, now gives us direct internet access, secure corporate WAN access. The secure corporate WAN is illustrated by the dotted red lines. The secure corporate internet access to our as-a-service applications, that is to Zscaler, that is the dotted green lines, and the solid black line here with the local internet breaker, LIB, that is for our guest users who go directly onto the raw internet at these sites. So we're covering quite a few bases. We also get the provider independence. So we are locked into a global service provider contract, but we do have the ability to use local service providers where we need to. So welcome to the fast lane. Before I do that, let me just remind you of this is our current or previous network, I should say. That's what it looked like before, and this is what it looks like today. So the words internet as a transport, internet as a backbone, these are more terms that we are more familiar with. If I just draw your attention to the bottom right, the home office or remote working, I can tell you at least at Eon Digital Technology, more than 50% of our workforce is working from home, at least 50% of the time. And this will continue. And I think globally we are seeing this. So Zscaler, we leverage Zscaler to reach our main applications. Our main application is Microsoft Teams. It consumes a hell of a lot of bandwidth and is the main application running over our network. And then from left to right down the bottom, we have the site architectures, which I talked about before, the intelligent network, which is SD-WAN only. We have the hybrid, and then we have the native MPLS as well. We've got our cloud interconnect provider talking to our public cloud. And there we've got SD-WAN virtual appliances and some Zscaler connectors. Too fast. So the benefits, I mean, I won't read out all the bullet points. You can read this yourself. But for us, the benefits have really been worthwhile. The visibility we didn't have before. The maximized investment, all of you are aware under the traditional MPLS model, or your primary and secondary circuit, 99.9% of the time, the secondary circuit you're paying for does nothing, but it's your insurance policy. We need that insurance policy. Under SD-WAN, we can aggregate those links, so we can use both links in a waterfall or aggregated bandwidth. We can use that in a DIA link and a satellite link if we need to. So the investment is maximized there, and also the redundancy. The centralized operations here, I have to say that this was also a major advantage of Silver Peak. We don't have a separate analytics engine. We don't have a separate appliance that we need to bolt on with several thousand different licenses. We've got one dashboard, one orchestrator to see everything. And yeah, it really works for us. Basically, that's it. Thanks for your time.
Any questions to Phil before we move on? Okay, we have a question. If you can just introduce yourself. Thanks.
My name is Jens Leuters, and I have a question.
Just 1 second. Let me give you a microphone.
So Jens Leuters, New Telco Frankfurt. Phil, thanks for the presentation. I have one question with regards to your underlying network. So how has this move into your intelligent network, SD-WAN, how has decreased your cost from the underlying network, and how do you do the carrier management?
There's a few questions there.
And I have even more.
So the underlying networks, I mean, we still need a physical medium to transport the data. And we've got a service provider that is probably like many service providers moving to an SD-WAN world where they've still got the same fiber into the building, but instead of an MPLS fiber, that's now an internet fiber or a mix of both. So we still use those technologies. The cost is a good question because under the MPLS model, the CPE comes with, the circuit. And so you've got your one router, but with the one MPLS model, you don't have all the advantages that SD-WAN gives us. And SD-WAN adds on to that cost by the appliance itself and the licensing you need. So yes, there's an additional cost there. If we've got a small site and we're just using DSL and some other basic technology, then we've got a cost advantage because the MPLS is not there. But most of our sites will have a DIA circuit, which is fiber, and the cost difference between MPLS and DIA is, in some cases, not that different. So you're right, there's an additional cost, but the benefits so far are, higher performance, better use of the network, seem to be worth it.
Thank you. And if I may ask one more question. So am I right that you are actually in a transition that you will move your whole network into this intelligent network? Because currently you have an MPLS network, you have a hybrid network, and you have the intelligent network. So do you have a roadmap to migrate everything into an intelligent network? And if that is the case, what role plays your data center in future in that concept? Because all your data is already in the cloud.
Yeah, so the intelligent network is a framework. It's a new architecture, so it incorporates the existing, the current, and the changes we want to make to the existing or old architecture, which is not fit for purpose and has a lot of complexity. So the intelligent network incorporates SD-WAN, but it is not just SD-WAN. It's a new architecture. Data centers, yes, we are emptying our data centers, but a few will remain, but much smaller. And with MPLS, we actually own our own fiber in a couple of countries, and so we're not going to sort of kill that. We're going to continue to make use of it. So we will make use of all of those technologies in the future, and just, it's all part of that cycle of continuous improvement. Where it needs to be improved, we'll improve it, and change takes time. So we'll get there.
Thank you very much. We have another question.
Okay.
Just a second. Oh, many questions. But there was, okay, move over here. First of all.
Hi, I'm Branislav from Deutsche Telekom, and thanks for the insights about the evolution of the network at E.ON. And my question is, as we are now also in the SASE story, we saw Zscaler. Are there any ideas to the, let's say, evolution and development to SASE or SSE, so the security part, or what is the next evolution you're planning at E.ON for your network?
No big evolution, so we're quite happy with what we've got at the moment. I'm not in the security team, so I'll leave those to those smarter people than me who handle that. But at the moment, Zscaler is doing that job for us. So as I understand it, SASE is more of a framework rather than a product. So it's how we do security at the edge, and currently, as I said, we employ Zscaler in the cloud for the corporate security, that's network and internet, and for the guest security, we do that at the edge on the Silverpeak device.
I think we'll touch more on that in the panel. Yeah. Actually, I wanted to bring up something related to that, but
sure,
I'll wait with it for the panel. One more question.
Alessandro Forcina, Cambridge Management Consulting. Unfortunately, my question was on security, because my question was, you mentioned Zscaler, Zero Trust Network Access. What about the other security functions such as IPS, Intrusion Prevention System, CASB, and so on and on?
Yeah, IPS, we're using that in Zscaler as well. So there's an extra little feature we've added on. So Zscaler has a whole suite of features, and you can pick and choose what you want. And so, yeah, definitely IPS is included in that.
Thank you.
Okay, I will add, as I said, we will talk more because there was one slide that was very interesting that you showed at the end with the architecture. And I think that's great for the panel as well, to bring some points from there. A technical question. You mentioned sub-second, I think, switch over or failover between links. Okay, so my question here, because I hear that many times. So let's say you have a link that has degraded. After how much time do you decide to switch?
I don't know about other vendors too well, but with Silverpeak, they have things called business intent overlay. So that's your overlay.
It's a real-time application, okay? So
real-time goes into the what they call high availability business intent overlay, and that has millisecond switchover. Oh. So it's a weird, I don't know how it does it, it's all in their intelligent magic, but it will switch a link with your voice conversation immediately. And what it does with at least with that business intent overlay, is sending the voice conversation packets over every underlay. So one of them is guaranteed to get it. But you can do other things, do high quality, which is using one link at a time. High availability, all of them at the same time, which reduces your bandwidth by 50%, but at least you guarantee delivery of the traffic. So we'll slice and dice depending on the application.
Yeah. So I'll just say about that, if you have a link that, let's say if you do sub-second, okay, you can have a packet or two that were lost and you decide to switch over. But it was actually the best link. So after another second, you need to switch over again. And then you need to switch over again and again and again. It creates a ping. Exactly. That's why I'm saying the sub-second failover is a very strong marketing buzzword. In reality, if you really switch in sub-second, you create an incredible ping pong that you don't want to be in. Okay? So there's much more details to it than I always hear sub-second. In reality, people don't switch sub-second. You need to have a window in which you decide, okay, if really the line has degraded, then I switch over. If it degraded for 500 milliseconds, I'm not going to switch over because of that. Okay, so just to put things, on the technical level here. I think we'll move over to the next presentation. Next presentation is Sandra Barnes, who is Chief Product Officer, who we heard before from Expereo, and he's gonna create a segue, I would say, into the panel talking about SASE and strategies for providing services to enterprises and SMBs. Over to you.
Thank you. And thanks for We're there. Well, welcome again. So I'll try to make the segue between now and the panel session. I'll explain a little bit more about a typical journey that we see our customers go through when they start to embark on that journey to go from a MPLS fixed network, start up using cloud applications, and need a whole new infrastructure and a whole new network. There will be a lot of similarities in the story that I will tell to what Phil just explained as well. So you can see it is real life things. Well, welcome again. We can switch that one now. And the next one, this is marketing, way too big a picture. So let's switch one as well. So there's a whole new environment that you need to take care of as the CIO or as the network manager in your corporation. And this is not only because of COVID. We see there's a lot of changes already happening before COVID in the way that people were working. Yes, it all got accelerated even further to about 50% of the workforce that now works from home or from another place. But this was a trend that had already started. It just got accelerated. And what are you going to do in order to give your staff an environment from an application and an infrastructure perspective that really supports them collaborating with each other, regardless where they work from? This has an implication on how you develop your LAN environment at the office, but also what do you put in place in order to make sure that your staff can work from home? And it's not just on the working from anywhere or the hybrid situation that you're looking for. It gets even more complex because your applications are going to go into the cloud. You're going to get a lot of applications that are sitting somewhere in a data center. It's called a cloud application. And as your central IT environment, you'll make sure that you have all your corporate applications properly mapped out and make sure that that is supported. But what cloud applications are also going to give you is that your local offices somewhere, it's so easy with a credit card to spin up yet another application somewhere, and central IT might not even be aware of that. So it's a highly fragmented and a highly complex environment that you need to work with, and this is going to have major implications on how you need to view your infrastructure and how you do that. Well, also Gartner made a strong statement there that the infrastructure of the future will not be architected at all as the networks that we have seen in the past. When we moved from technology through technology, I just sat down with someone and we talked about X25. That's a very long time ago. But in terms of technologies, there's always innovation. There's always something new coming. But this is really the first time where you're really going to have to rethink the way, how am I connecting? Getting to the internet, there are many ways to get there through centralized gateways, but that might not support the user experience that you're looking for. So you're looking much more towards a local breakout solution, but then how do you make the right choice? How do I ensure that infrastructure supports the applications that I've selected? There's no question about it. SD-WAN, and we'll talk about SASE later as well. There's a lot of growth in there, and we're going to continue to see that growth. I do see a very different adoption rate in terms of large global networks versus small regional or domestic networks. On the large global scale, I would say we're still at the beginning of that growth line, but it's clear SD-WAN, there are a lot of benefits that you can get out of it if you decide to take your applications into the cloud. So what kind of benefits are you then looking for? Well, first of all, underlay agnostic. Making a choice to go use cloud applications, adding the right type of internet access at your sites does not suddenly mean that you're going to have to do hot swaps or cancel all of your existing infrastructure. The previous presentation clearly showed that as well. You can beautifully run in a hybrid scenario. SD-WAN is network agnostic. Cost effective. Well, that really depends on your architecture that you're going to go for. We just heard a story that there was actually a cost increase, but there was a much better user experience and flexibility that the company benefited for. We've seen other designs as well that we supported our clients with when they did a full migration from MPLS into a full internet-based SD-WAN. And there we were able to give them about a 30% cost savings. I wouldn't make that my top agenda point to do this migrations. It's really about the flexibility. It's really about being able to adopt a whole new infrastructure and an environment to support how your staff works with each other, but not just your staff. It's the way that you work together with your vendors. It's the way how you interact with all of your customers. It's all going across the internet these days. So, so those are the benefits that you can do. It enables a way for you to get to your cloud access. True, on an MPLS network, you have your direct or express routes that can help, but it's highly inflexible. If you want to make use of the internet in order to get to your clouds, there's a lot of flexibility there. And again, with an SD-WAN deployment, you might get the benefits from that. How you want to deploy that, there's a little boxer in front of me. You can't all read that, but there are many ways in order how you want to buy and manage your SD-WAN and how you want to mix that with a security environment. Security is a really big word. It means something different for almost everybody. But the SD-WAN itself has got a lot of security aspects to it as well, which you can further complement with solutions like a Zscaler or other cloud security solutions. One of the big benefits that SD-WAN is going to give you is the flexibility and the ease of use. You're going to get that global overview on your entire network performance, which is a great benefit for most IT managers, and they need to ensure that all the applications stay up and you can see what's going on. And because SD-WAN is application aware, it also gives you a lot of insights in that what I mentioned earlier, other applications that might have been spun up somewhere that central IT might not be aware of, but SD-WAN, at least you can create those insights, you can see what's going on, which is another benefit that you get out of that. I won't talk too much about the last one, SASE, but SASE or SSE or whatever the next term is going to be is a great addition towards your whole SD-WAN if that works for you. And when, especially in a distributed working environment, it can really make a difference. We added a little statement here, and it's not mine, it's Gartner's. You can see that the term SASE is very hot, but at the same time, the technology itself is still immature. So we're going to see a lot of innovation soon as well. So is it then magic? No, it isn't. It's actually still highly complex. Building a network takes a lot of knowledge. You need to understand all your different applications and how they work in your global network. True, by the time that you've gone into your, you've created your site profiles, and when the SD-WAN announces itself to your orchestrators, the whole deployment of that has become a lot easier. But I would definitely not call it zero touch or zero deployment. There's a lot of pre-work that needs to be done. And I still haven't seen a box just float onto a site and gets connected to that location all by itself. So you need to make sure that, that you are aware of that. How do I get a box on site? How gets it installed in my network? And do I have the right configurations for all the different site designs that we're going through? I'm missing one slide here, but that's okay. I'll talk about it. So when we look at a typical deployment, so how do you make a choice for a managed services provider? Well, there are quite a few aspects that you need to consider. One is who's going to manage the SD-WAN. Do I want to do it myself? If you have IT teams that are strong and knowledgeable enough, that might be one way of doing it. Or do I outsource this and I procure it as a managed service? On the underlay services as well. SD-WAN is only as good as the underlay that you can procure and the quality of the underlay, as well as the internet that is related to that and how that plays with each other. So when you look at a typical global network, there's a lot of local ISP networks that need to come together. We've seen network designs that involve 300 to 400 or even more different ISPs. Do you really want to contract all of those yourself, or do I make use of a service provider that consolidates that all for me, so that I have a single pane of glass on all of that performance, but also one bill to pay and one support number to call, which makes life a lot easier. And then I think what you want to have as a global enterprise, when you go through this whole motion, don't underestimate the change of your staff. This is all just technology, and technology will change. The biggest change that you will be managing is the change management of how people work with each other, and how they need to adopt the new applications within the processes that they need to work with. And we see that when we are in these technology deployment projects, that if we see delay, it's usually not because of technology, the availability of a box or a local access line that needs a little bit of a longer lead time. Yes, all of that will happen. But we see that most of the delay is introduced by the change management, the adoption of a new way of working, which will take time. So make sure that that is in your plan as well. Suddenly my other slide popped up. Well, we just went through all of these points as well. What we as Expereo can do, a little bit about us. We can provide the full underlay. We have a full visibility for any location anywhere in the world about what kind of access technology is available, which local access suppliers and ISPs support that, and the underlying costs. So that really helps to make a design that fits your budget, fits your application choice, because all the applications are unique, but also looks for the site availability that you're looking for. If you want to connect a factory, you're looking for a high availability design, so you want to make sure that all your links are properly supported by SLAs, and that gives you that 99.99 that you're looking for. For a small sales offer somewhere else, you'll have a completely different requirement. So just to say, I would like to have that. It's very difficult. You don't know what's available until we have looked. So this is where we can really help. If you want to see the whole collaboration between your underlay and your overlay, and see how the two play with each other, it would be great if you had a single interface that gives you all of that. As Expereo, we have developed one platform. We call it Expereo One. It is technology agnostic, and so it doesn't matter what kind of SD-WAN technology we provide to you. Your views will always be the same, which is great. If you grow as a company, because of your budget and the complexity of your network, you might want to start with an SD-WAN technology that fits that requirement better. After maybe some acquisitions or growth and more complexity in your network, you might want to change your SD-WAN technology to support the new requirements. You don't have to train your teams. We keep the interface all exactly the same, which can also be a great benefit for you to focus on your own business growth and your business benefits, while a managed service provider takes care of all that technology change and innovation in the background. And with that one, I want to close today's keynote and look forward to our panel session. Thank you, Amir.
Okay, we are running a bit late on time, but if there is a question from somebody?
I'm in the panel.
Okay, we'll ask on the panel. So let's move over to the panel.
How we're going to do this?
Can we be?
How many of us are there? Next to you. Where do you want me?
Close.
Very close. Yeah, just cozy.
Okay. Amir, do you want to sit here on the live wing?
I'll be here. It's
Okay. Yeah, come on. Let's sit close to you so we're a bit more better in the picture. Phil, maybe you take one of the mics on your desk that you can be heard better.
Yeah, cool. Maybe that's not a good idea.
That was super interesting what you showed us. Come on, really nice insights.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Smart.
in addition to the panelists that we have here in the room, we also have two panelists who are connected from remote. So I'll just describe the title very high level, then we'll do a quick round of introductions, and then I'll touch a bit more and we'll move over to some questions, and hopefully we'll have some questions from the audience. Until now, we got questions, so I hope that we'll have more from the audience. So the panel is talking about the service provider strategies for SD-WAN and SASE services when they cater to SMBs or large enterprises, and we'll try to talk a little bit about the differences between them. Let's start with a quick round of introduction. We'll start maybe with our two remote panelists. So Eric, if you can hear us and you can introduce yourself even by video, that would be great. Here he is.
Sure. I'm Eric Kreifelt. I'm a principal analyst with Telegeography. We're a market research firm that covers the global market for network services. We're particularly focused on international transactions, international services in wholesale and retail including enterprise and consumer.
Great. Thank you very much. And Mark from Spirent, if you can introduce yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Mark Cohn and I'm from Spirent Communications, a world leader in communications testing technology. I am a principal technology strategist that's looking at the near-term future and applications that actually exploit all of our core competencies across the company. I also participate in some external activities, including the MEF SD-WAN program. I'm actually the program lead for the first SD-WAN certification program that the MEF has been offering since 2019.
Thank you, Mark. And now we can move over. Actually, Phil, you already spoke, so people know you, but you can just...
Yeah, my name is Phil. I'm a network architect lead at E.ON Digital Technology.
I'm Sander, Chief Product Officer, Expereo.
Yeah, Philip Hausner from Cisco. I'm the leader for the EMEA Technical Services Architects on SD-WAN for Cisco.
Daniel Burke from Lumen. I'm the product manager for SD-WAN and SASE in EMEA.
Hi, I'm Branislav Kuritanovic. I'm from Deutsche Telekom. And so my role is, I feel a bit pity about Phil, because exactly what you described is my job, to find the right solution. And as we're SD-WAN vendor agnostic, what we've done is exactly what you were searching for, compare all the solutions to answer which is the right fit so that you don't have to think about it. So I feel really pity. And to go over to SASE, I've done that as well at the moment with colleagues analyzing exactly the top Gartner quadrant leader SASE offerings, to see, okay, where they differ, how do they implement to exactly solve and answer questions like you had as a customer, so maybe we can have a chat on that.
Okay, great. And my name, as I said before, I'm Yours Mora, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of FlexiWAN. And to better introduce the topic, I would start to go back a little bit in history. And once upon a time, we had MPLS and dedicated lines, and everything was on site, and cloud did not exist except for the clouds that we see that give us the rain. And then enterprises started to move their applications to the cloud. And suddenly it changed the network requirements. And SD-WAN came along and brought us a great promise of disaggregation of software and hardware, which didn't happen completely even until today. Usage of general purpose lines, instead of those very expensive dedicated lines, broadband LTE, instead of that, much more network agility, and most importantly, I would say, connectivity to the cloud. And the beginning was all about cost reduction, although we know very well that today it's not really cost reduction. And in many cases, in the SD-WAN deployment ways, the bandwidth is going up very, very significantly because a lot of packets are duplicated and stuff like that. And there is a lot of overhead in the headers of the SD-WAN. So it's not necessarily cost reduction, but it's much more agility and better quality and less lock into a specific connectivity provider. Now, after that, we had SASE that was mentioned before. And we're going to talk a little bit about SASE. And SASE became kind of the holy grail like 2 years ago, the peak of inflated expectations on the Gartner hype cycle. Everybody was looking for SASE. Many didn't even exactly know what it is, but everybody talked about it, Secure Access Service Edge. And then suddenly, not long ago, Gartner came out with a new term called SSE, Secure Service Edge. I'm trying to remember all of these acronyms. And basically, when you look at the reality, companies, enterprises, and also vendors and service providers, they all spoke about SASE, but in reality, you had many different architectures. And that was the very interesting slide that Phil showed us before of their network. They separated between what they took for SD-WAN and their provider for security that is now called SSE. Zscaler didn't know that they're SSE until Gartner invented the acronym, but they are SSE, okay? And they made their choice of best of breed. And there are other things that can happen of how do you decide on which type of traffic do you direct to the SSE provider, which traffic you take directly. All of these are architectural decisions that need to be taken into consideration. And as we start the panel, I would like to ask you a very simple question. Do you think that there is a single right solution, regardless if it's a large enterprise or it's a smaller enterprise? If there isn't, what are the consideration points that you would take as a vendor, as an enterprise, as a service provider, when you decide which solution to deploy to which type of customer? I know it's a pretty broad question, so you can adjust your answers a little bit, and we'll try to drill in a little bit into it afterwards. So who wants to take the first stab at this? Maybe we'll start from the left-hand side.
Yes, of course. I mean, of course, there is the one solution. It's the one which fits to the one customer with the one exactly requirements. And that shows the complexity of that. I mean, Phil nicely elaborated that, right? So you have a customer, and each customer different. Even in the scale, they differ. If you have a small customer or a small businesses, they have different requirements than large customers, which also means, okay, other international or more national, the amount of sites, and all these things play a role. And that's also the reason why you have so many security or SD-WAN solutions, because there is no one fits all. And that's okay. I mean, Phil nicely explained, he has Silver Peak Aruba, but now it could be in 5 years that some different company, right? Because solutions change, requirements change, business develops.
Okay, so actually interesting, I had the previous discussion with Philip here, and he introduced his point of view, but let's hear Daniel first, so we'll go according to the...
Yeah, well, surprisingly, there is no one solution because, well, if all customers were the same, as you said, then there would be, but they're not. They're all coming from different places, different histories, different skills, different strategies about what they want to do in-house, what they want to outsource, different locations. Different industries that they're working with, different contexts for their security and their appetite for security and their security posture. So there is no one solution. You have to be flexible and listen to the customer, of course, and find out what's important to them rather than mandating one solution for them.
Okay, so I'll try to focus the question a bit more, and then maybe you'll want to add some more, because I'm trying to understand, yeah, of course it's not a one size fits all, it can never be.
Yeah.
The question is the consideration point the size of the enterprise? Is it the requirements of the enterprise? And what do you do in your example as a service provider? We have two service providers who just spoke now. As a service provider, what do you do in order to really be able to service more segments? Or maybe you can say, okay, we only service the very small enterprises, the mid-size, the very big ones, and that's it, if it's because of size, or only these type of requirements, if it's that. So I'm trying to focus a little bit, if you can elaborate further.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Lumen, we probably have a sort of sweet spot about in terms of the size of enterprise. So we're probably not always dealing in EMEA with the very, very small customers. So that's already a focus that's kind of telling us where we're going to focus on. But it's so much about, again, it's to a certain extent where the customer's coming from. It's not about their size. That could be a thing, but you can get very demanding small customers, and large customers who are much more relaxed. I can't think of a single thing or even way apart from say to listen, because you'll pick up you'll see what's important to them and see what problems are they trying to solve ultimately.
Okay, thank you. And well, Eric and Mark, don't worry, we're coming back to you. I want you to hear the point of views, and you not representing not a service provider or an SD-WAN vendor, you'll give us the neutral point of view. So we'll wait with you for a few more minutes. Okay, please.
So yeah, I mean, I just couldn't agree more. There is no one fits all. What we have chosen is basically two things where you say you have an option. Your portfolio is broad, so you can offer different solutions. That's what we talked before, right? In Cisco specifically, we have two portfolios. One is the classic Cisco with a Viptela solution, which addresses the, I would say, simply complex networks, high demanding customers. And then you have the Meraki solution, which is focused on ease of use and centralized dashboard environment. And both have their existence and their customer. And I could not really quantify the customer, right? We have large customers on both sides, we have small customers on both sides. So that just underpins that the requirement of the customer is really very different across. And the same is when you go into SASE. We offer our own SASE solutions with both of our SD-WAN portfolios in there. We have our own security services, but we also partner with somebody like Zscaler and other third-party vendors where you have the flexibility to choose and what the customer wants. Don't get me wrong, we always love to sell our own stuff first, right? So there's no question as a vendor, and also for my service provider colleagues, I think they're in the same boat. But what we're trying to achieve is really to make these adapting to the needs of an enterprise, of a customer, what size, what requirements they have is really important, and what other technologies they already have in place. And Phil, you mentioned that in your presentation as well, right? You have that Zscaler already in place, so you want to use that, and you want to be able, your integration is there.
So if I translate it to a very simple statement, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is that the way to cater to different segments is just by having multiple solutions versus having a solution that can be kind of modified.
Or modify your solution so much that you can have a wide span. I think there are limits to what you can do between complexity and simplicity, right? You want a lot of features, a lot of knobs and bolts coming more from the traditional world. You can't have that complex, those simple to manage. If you go to the very simple, what you showed in your dashboard, you're very great. It's very easy for a non-demanding customer who wants to outsource that service and hide the complexity either in intelligence or with a partner. But it's not like you can do one size fits all.
Okay, I'll quote a service provider that's not here, but that was in another panel some time ago, and they're using only a single vendor. And he asked the other service providers, so you have a customer coming in, and how do you decide which solution to give them because you're offering 3 or 4? Okay, and so we look at the requirements, and based on that, and now the requirements have changed because they grew, they acquired a company, blah, blah, blah. What do? You switch? Okay, so there should be a balance between the level of changes you can do inside that single system that you're offering in order to allow for change of requirements, I think.
But I mean, you can take it also, I mean, nicely elaborated, you know, when you want to have Cisco, you have a lot of freedom in configuration, you know, and we heard from Phil, this business intent overlay of Aruba, they differ. And maybe it's the most easiest way to start from the top line saying, okay, what do you want as a customer? You know, when you want to have, for example, Aruba, then you go with this business intent overlay saying you want to have application landscape which is optimized, you know, out of the box. That's where is Aruba known for. If you want to have the freedom of configuration, for sure. I mean, Cisco by its history offers exactly that. And this is how you can put all, you know, the solutions, even Fortinet, you know, Juniper, etc. This is maybe a good starting point to know, okay, what is the unique selling point, how the vendors see themselves, you know, and then you can narrow a bit.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move over to Sander.
Yeah, I think we're talking a lot about technology here, but don't forget customer culture, people, and geographical locations. If I look at some of the large networks that we're supporting, if I understand, for instance, how they operate in China, that will completely create a different requirement. Well, Russia's kind of a no-go at the moment, but if you it starts with customer requirements. You have to match that with the customer culture, also with budget. Sure, we can go for technology that can do it all, which can also support the simple networks, but why pay for something that you're never going to use? So you need to find a healthy balance between all of those things. I think you called that requirements. I would add to that also the geographical spread. What kind of support does the customer expect? And the one thing that I see with technology vendors is that not everybody can give you the same RMA experience globally. If it is 8 by 5 by next business day shipment, that really changes the design of the network, because now I need to make sure that I have enough boxes on site in order to create that site availability. If the vendor can support 24 by 7 by 2 on site, that again will change the way that we look at the design. So it's a combination of all of those aspects which makes every customer unique. Based on their application landscape, where those locations are, and their budget and their requirements.
Okay, so it's kind of a combination of requirements and size, I would say. Okay, Phil, before we move over to you, I would want to see the answers from Eric and from Mark, because then I have a question to you also that relates to things that you presented, to segue kind of into security. So Eric and Mark, who wants to go first? And maybe, Eric, if you have some things you want to share with us from a data perspective, please feel free to do that. You can share your screen if you have some information to share. Yeah.
Sure. Sure. Thanks. I think there's some consensus here about not one single solution, unless, of course, it's the one you're selling. But I think Daniel made a good point about, it's not 100% correlated with the size of the enterprise, because, a small enterprise could have very demanding requirements either for the application itself or a particularly global footprint, even though it might be a smaller company, although you would probably find that more often with a larger company. But and also related to that, I think was also mentioned that is a given company's appetite for managing the WAN itself and having that capability in-house versus not seeing it as a core competitive advantage in that sense, and they're more happy to have it managed and have it even be a bit more opaque so long as it meets the requirements. And in that sense, about those requirements, as what's been saying, it's about the applications rather than maybe some of these other metrics. I mean, if you need a lot of processing power and immediate access to it, that suggests one architecture versus another one, if you can handle a few more milliseconds, and do things more centrally. So it's things like that that maybe drive it a bit more. As far as criteria, we'll see how quickly I can get the screen share up for us. And okay, let's see, there it is. Looks okay?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. That was the security one. So there we go. So just some of the criteria for selecting vendors, which isn't quite, the solution itself, but just surveying mostly large global enterprises make up this survey that we did, and asking about the criteria that we offered them. Price is interesting. The price has actually gone back and forth. It was initially all about price, and then it became more about performance. And then it's, now price is popular again. And there are some aspects of the vendor itself. There's not just one solution, but we probably don't need 60. And some of that M&A, it sounds like Phil's done okay with the acquisition of the vendor that they chose. But that's a factor. You want to make sure they're going to be around to support, and security has risen as a big factor as well. Not so much the deployment model is flexible, and they can just different options there. And I don't want to make Mark angry with the standardization here. I think maybe from the enterprise point of view, yes, they would love it if they have an acquisition and it's interoperable, but what good is interoperability if it doesn't satisfy their needs in the first place? So I don't want to understate the importance of standardization, but when we ask, it comes up beyond, a little bit lower than some of the other fundamentals.
Thank you very much, Eric. Mark, so let's move over to you, please.
Yeah, there's no question that there is no one size fits all, but there are common characteristics, I think, that a lot of customers and a lot of service providers are considering and driving their strategies. I mean, some of them being, all of them have to migrate from some existing environment. There's a notion of a greenfield, but it really isn't. It's really L networks are hybrid networks in this sense. And that tends to drive a lot of decisions, whether it's the vendor selection, whether it's some of the policies that are going to be implemented, or whether it's just in general what this architecture looks like. The other main driver, and I think Eric touched on it, was applications. This is not about network connectivity. It's not about bits and bytes. It's really about, well, how do you actually access applications in the cloud? And SD-WAN, it really evolved from the campus technology into this cloud access. And that implies going to the next level to the security. That's why we're seeing the security considerations that are driving SASE, SSE, or really cloud-hosted security with zero trust access. And the other thought that I had is that when I looked at, and Eric, I'm fascinated with your data because you do get right to the heart of it, what enterprises are looking at. But other data that I'm running across is indicating that enterprises are not trying to take this on their own anymore. And that's why the managed services industry all of a sudden exploded. And now we're seeing this big crossover a couple of years ago, I'd say 2020, when we saw more uptake of enterprises moving to managed services than they were going to do it on their own. And that has significant implications, like, for instance, standardization, just to come and address that point. The standards that are being created are not being created for enterprise. They're being created for the managed service provider community, because that's the group that needs to deal with multiple vendors, multiple different approaches, customers, environments, much more so than any one enterprise. And I think that that's how we have to think about this moving ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just touch one point about this from what Sander presented at the end of his slides, that even though I understand you're using multiple vendors, right? They still have a one user experience for all, although I assume that not all of the vendors have the same APIs. You just had to do the work in order to integrate with all of them into your system.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. Okay, so that relates to some extent to standards. Maybe life would have been easier if everything was the same. Phil, so I left you on purpose to the end because you're the only one that actually represents an enterprise here, right? So it's interesting to hear your point of view, not from the service provider's perspective, but from an enterprise perspective. If when you selected the vendor, if there were some vendors that you said, oh, they don't fit to our segment completely, we're not even looking at them, how did you make that very short list of vendors that you started evaluating with respect to requirements, with respect to size that they cater to? What can you say about that?
Well, we had a decision matrix the things that were important to us. So typically, I'm saying typically, not all, but service providers will work with a vendor that works for their business, and we needed to find a SD-WAN vendor that worked for our business. And so we had the typical things like Gartner leader. We wanted a Microsoft Office 365 partner. We wanted a Zscaler integrator an SD-WAN vendor that was very well integrated with Zscaler because that was a key technology for us. But we also wanted something, one dashboard, they did not have a complex licensing model, so even little things like that. But we had a long list of requirements, and some of the vendors couldn't meet these. And so we had a decision matrix that was basically a green and a red dot next to each vendor. The list of requirements on our left and the vendors across the top, and basically we narrowed it down to who had the least red marks next against them.
Okay, so it's basically requirements, I would say. I want to check about time because we have 5 minutes. Is it okay if we go 5 minutes over time, just to manage the questions? Yes, okay, great. So we'll continue with you, Phil, and coming back to the slide that you showed towards the end of your presentation with the architecture. And the question that I want to ask is related to security, and where should security reside? We have the recommendation, let's call it, of SASE that pretty much defines a silo where you have a single provider, let's call it, because it's not exactly a vendor anymore, it's a service provider that provides you the edge device with the edge software, the backbone that the edge device always connects through that backbone, connects always to the first POP, and through the backbone of that provider, it goes to the security in the cloud of that provider, and then over the backbone again to the closest POP, the one that is closest to the destination. On the other hand, there are more agile, let's call it, or flexible and hybrid approaches, like you presented on your slide, that you have a different provider for the cloud security. Some of the lines were actually going around it and not going through that cloud provider. And probably there are some considerations that your enterprise has of which traffic does go through the SSE provider and what type of traffic would not go through it and would skip it. So from your point of view, where would you want to see security? Do you also have some security elements at the edge where everything is in the cloud? If you could touch that, please.
I can talk for E.ON, but everybody's different. Everyone's got a different requirement, and I have to preface what I'm about to say by saying I'm not a security person, I'm a network person. But our biggest network now is not in the network, it's people working from home, or the hotel, or the train station, or the airport. And so the edge for these remote workers, which is quite a huge network now, thousands and thousands of devices, has to be at the edge. So we're not putting a network of security appliances there, but they are connecting to our network. I would say we have different security infrastructure and requirements for a data center, for a small site, and for a corporate office. And we make decisions, or our security people make decisions on best fit for purpose. But I cannot advise on the best place for a secure situation because, impossible.
I guess the answer is it depends.
It depends.
Okay. Okay. So who wants to take the question next?
Well, let's go down the line. Yes, it depends. I've seen different types of configurations. If we want to say Zscaler, I've seen configurations whereby everything was pointed towards Zscaler, so all applications were screened by the Zscaler application. That ended up having some impact on the user experience. Take, for instance, the Office 365 suite. We ended up taking that out of that Zscaler environment and do that with local breakouts straight to the 365 cloud, because that gave a much better user experience. But it pretty much depends on the application choice, what security means for the customer that we're supporting, how we're going to set that up. What I do think we're going to see in the near future is that routing and security is all starting to merge, and whereby you're going to get a lot of that capability within the network itself. pretty much coming from the cloud. And and what kind of acronym Gartner is going to give that, we're going to see. But I do think somewhere 2023, you're probably going to see the first versions of that.
Okay, we can try to make up the acronym already now.
We can make a suggestion. Yeah.
Something with the letter H inside for hybrid, maybe. Okay, we'll think about that later. Yes, please.
Okay, also coming from a network perspective, I'm not a security expert, but I would clearly say the security needs to be everywhere. Coming from that perspective, I would say you need to have security everywhere. You have to have it on the edge. You have to have it when you access the cloud. You have to have it inside your corporate networks, inside your data center. You have to have it inside your cloud deployments. So there is no answer where you say, oh, put everything on the edge or put everything on the device or put it only in the cloud. I think it needs to be everywhere, and it needs to be those solutions like zero trust, like an IPS or a firewall, a classical one where you protect access points. It could be something like a client residing on a machine, like you described when you're in an airport or here at the hotel. I cannot put a device in here. So, but it needs to be all across the network. And I think the power will come from if you combine the intelligence of the network with the security, bring that together, do the analytics, and then defend that. So it's not what we said in the past where you had perimeter security, where you could clearly define outside and inside, and you could say on the border, I have my enforcement. That's still true maybe for a large interconnect, right? Where you do an interconnection to different cloud services. But from an overall perspective, it needs to be everywhere.
Interesting. Yeah. So to agreeing with what's been said, but it's also interesting thinking about, why did SASE talk about security going in the cloud? One of the reasons was because of the performance requirements of some of the security capabilities. So, can they be put on the edge because we won't have the power down there? So I can see, for some enterprises, we're seeing, well, I need to have this capability in the cloud for my remote users. Well, why don't I put my branch security in there as well to simplify things? But it's also interesting thinking about where people are coming from. Some customers, I think, are very attached to their current security provider, whether it be Zscaler or whoever, and will want to keep that. And so then it becomes a challenge about how, and obviously with your architecture, and one thing that leads to can be having to stitch together your SD-WAN devices and your security devices, which can create a lot of complexity. So there's a lot in this decision about how to do security, and whether it should be driven from the, if you like, from the SD-WAN vendor or from the SASE vendor, or do we keep what we've got and mix it in that way?
Or maybe do a gradual migration. Okay.
Yeah, I would like that you all imagine for a second your car, or just approaching a car. What is the first thing you do? You take your keys, you open the car, you sit down, you fasten the seatbelt, right? There were two features of security in there: opening the car and fasten the seatbelt. And we saw here now 2 points where in this panel where you said, okay, we're network expert, but not security expert. So that's the problem which we have nowadays, that network and security were totally disconnected. And that's why I'm grateful to Gartner that they put for the first time security on a platform, saying security by design, like in cars. Imagine if you would not have an airbag, if you would not have a seatbelt. It is incredible if you just sleep for a second or you're not aware and then you crash. You have the seatbelt, you have the airbag, everything is cool. And it's the same with security network. For the first time, we have the convergence of security network functions, which means if you forget something at the moment, then you have the security features in there in one solution. And it's not like, in former times you have SD-WAN and then you take, let's say, the Zscaler, Palo Alto. They're all great solutions, don't get me wrong, but it's not by design. It's then by demand or purpose. The security has to be in there as a building block. And that changes SASE, and that's a great thing about that, and SSE as well.
Okay, thank you. Eric, I see you already prepared a slide for us, so please go ahead. We can't hear you. Maybe you're muted. Eric? Yeah, you're muted.
Oh, that's his security features. He wants that we read from the lips.
Okay, there we go. It had hidden my mute button when I was showing you the slides. So let's do that again. Okay, trying to get ahead of it and it failed. So yeah, I think a couple of interesting points that have been made already is that, you know, I think the security team at an enterprise can continue to be somewhat siloed, you know, following on the last point. And even Phil said, I'm a network guy, not a security guy. And that's really common on the user side. So it has been somewhat profound to try to marry those things together. But on the provider side, it seems like, you know, and on the slide here, you can see we've asked, and these are enterprises that are already adopting SD-WAN. How are they, how are they sourcing their security services? And you can see it's a fairly even spread of what we've asked, you know, of the different options that we've asked about. But one thing about it, they all kind of funnel back to the same handful of security vendors, because even if it's being provided by, you know, a network service provider, maybe kind of a more traditional telco, or a systems integrator, or an SD-WAN vendor, you know, it may be just Palo Alto behind it anyway, you know, either more or less transparently. So, you know, but in terms of the sourcing, I suppose, you know, it can come from different ways, and directly from the vendor looks a bit smaller, but again, that kind of hides the fact that it's, you know, the same sources, you know, of the services ultimately.
Thank you. And Mark, when we turn over to you, I want to take advantage of the two hats that you're wearing, Spirent on one hand and MEF on the other. And if you can also touch about the challenges in the deployment and delivery of secure SD-WAN managed services and integration of all of these with SASE. If you can touch that as well, thank you.
Sure, thanks, Amir. I think the panel's response to the question is sort of indicative of what the situation is. Because we are siloed, and there's a network group and a security group, and most of us on this panel are network experts and not security experts. And at the same time, Eric is showing what we've already seen. So Eric, I've seen multiple different research assessments that indicate that this multi-vendor security situation is just going to get broader and not to be negative, but worse, in the sense that the proliferation of vendors is just increasing, because we've never seen segmentation like we do in security. I mean, cybersecurity has dozens of segments. I mean, you go to RSA in San Francisco as an example, there's like 50,000 people, but there's like 40,000 network segments of all the problems they're trying to solve. And this is what we have to address. And to do that, I think that one of the reasons why managed services became an option is because enterprises just throw up their hands and they can't deal with the complexity. And when you layer up-leveling networking to provide application level networking and cloud access with SD-WAN, with trying to secure it all in a multi-vendor, multi-domain security environment, now you can understand why you're going to be looking to traditional service providers to provide the, in some cases it is the same products, but having those products sitting in a box and getting those products into a network is a whole different proposition. And one of the aspects that we are going to see at least increasing attempts to do is to introduce, as Amir was pointing out, introduce standardization, at least for the managed service provider, so that we can deal more effectively with this multi-vendor issue. Now, my company, Spirent, has this unique role of being this Switzerland in terms of providing testing that's independent of each of your solutions, independent of service providers and vendors, and the integrators who are also involved in this ecosystem. And what we're seeing is the need to be able to provide a way to normalize the testing and validation of these capabilities. Because to go into an environment where each vendor is providing their own tools and testing and the like is not going to cut it in this multi-vendor environment. So there is going to be a need in addition to this to be able to not only validate multi-vendor connectivity, but moving up the stack, even getting all the way to the application layer. You know, this notion of being able to validate at the service layer and then at the security layer and even at the application layer. And that's what we're going to see over the long term.
Okay, thank you. We have to close the panel, so I just want to ask the audience if there are any questions before we close. Any question you want, you can even ask a question which is specific to a panelist. One question, okay. We'll take one question and we'll close. I'm being pushed here on time, but we started a few minutes later.
Thank you. I am an engineer, and I come from the network side. So in the old days, MPLS, there were the metric, and the metric were the famous triplet, delay, loss, and jitter, then reliability, and MTTR, and so on and on. And when I was a student many years ago, my professor, after 3 hours, you are an engineer, and you have a system in front of you, and each system on this planet has a metric. My question is, with respect to the old world, delay, loss, and jitter, we are the metric of the new world, SD-WAN plus security.
The question is to somebody specific or to everybody? So we need. No, okay. So what?
I'm not sure. I am sure that none, almost none, has addressed this question. I don't know whether in math.
So we can take one answer, okay? One answer because they're gonna kill me. So who wants to give the best answer?
Oh, I'll take that.
I can take.
Sander, okay. Managed service provider, go ahead.
It's user experience.
Okay.
And you go, no. In the background, we're using the metrics that you just explained. And we're adding to that also application performance, which is not displayed, like jitter, latency, and packet loss. But what does this mean for a typical user? Very little. So we're putting layers on top of that to display this in terms of user experience. Yeah, and because that's at the end of the day, the only thing that really counts. Is the application available, and is my user happy to use it? Because if it doesn't work, they're going to go out and have a cup of coffee, and that's not good for my productivity.
Okay, so focus.
I appreciate you as an engineer that you like to hear bits and bytes, but it's going to be user experience.
Focusing on the coffee, we can continue over coffee the discussion. Absolutely. I would like to thank everybody for participation. Thank you. I'm sorry for going over time.